what could you do with those stablecoin tokens? And I think in the Discord, Eric, you had dropped like some of your top 3 stablecoin farms and yield opportunities you've been going in. You want to cover some of those, and maybe at some point we can get into the risks of each of those.
Yeah, I think like it's especially poignant when we're talking about we might be headed towards a little more goblin town anyways, like things might get a little uglier in the near term. So like, maybe at 3,200 ETH, you don't want to be like necessarily staking ETH right now. Maybe you want to like wait until ETH's a little lower, which would mean you go into stables first, and then you can like get more ETH to stake a little later, for instance. So I've been looking at it, and like, keep in mind, guys, I'm coming from traditional finance, right? So like we have inbound demand from clients who are like non-crypto native guys. These are like meat space, like lawyers, real estate guys who have money, and these guys are asking me this simple question. They're like, God, Eric, if there's only some way where I could like yield, like they're bearish on the markets broadly. So like if I could just like take cash and yield on it and have it be liquid, that would be just like a dream come true. But I hate crypto. And I'm like, okay, well, I have a perfect solution for you, but it's in crypto. So like these stablecoin yields that we're talking about are amazing. Like, we're capturing, near 20% or, probably in some cases upwards of 20% yields on dollars, like digital dollars that we call stablecoins. And I think what this next conversation is going to be is like, what are the risks of these stablecoins? Okay, so the way that I look at it is in traditional finance terms, you have 2 types of risk. You have systematic risk and idiosyncratic. Systematic is like what's the risk of like stablecoins at large, and then idiosyncratic is like what's the risk of an individual stablecoin or an individual protocol. So I think that's like a good way to like frame it from the get-go. So systematic risk in stablecoins is like, what if regulation, like, US government starts to regulate stablecoins, they like ban them, they want only like the central bank digital currency or something. That's a risk. I think that's a real one. And I don't know how that really plays out. The systematic risk is difficult to pinpoint today. The idiosyncratic, I think, has multiple layers. So when you're talking about each stablecoin itself, you have like USDC and USDT. These are like backed stablecoins. And then that's separated from the algorithmic stablecoins, right? We're all familiar with this, but like not a lot of people are. So like a backed stablecoin has like US dollars in a vault that represent each US DC stablecoin on the blockchain. But then there's algorithmic ones that are pegged using math. Right. Okay, so those are their own idiosyncratic or like independent risks.
And we did cover an example, by the way, UST last podcast. So we did touch a little bit on algorithmic stablecoins.
Okay, nice. Okay, so and then when you actually go to try to use these things to actually generate yield, then you add on a new layer of idiosyncratic risk, and that's when you trust a protocol or like a mathematical vending machine to like actually pay you and keep your money safe. So that's a whole nother layer. I think like when we're looking at this, we can all even disagree on what's the safest or what's the riskiest. I think there's like crypto heads at the core value system don't believe in fiat currency, and they think that like USDC is very risky because it's based on fiat. It's like it's backed by dollars in a vault, and that's based on fiat. Whereas like my people are going to say like, well, that's the safest. Like that's the system that I'm used to. So I think that's a good frame, and I'll let you guys take it from here.
Well, I was going to say, maybe if you could, given that frame, now can you give us an example of one of the applications that you're using to yield either Anchor or Stargate or Balancer, and then while you describe it, maybe kind of associate those risks to like that example, so we can.
I think before we do there, I want to like just make sure we do like one more little delineation, right? We talked about algorithmic versus like collateralized, right? I think it's important to distinguish like between the types of collateral, right? Like you have USDC, which is 1-to-1 actual dollars in a bank, governed by, US law, right? But then you have USDT, which is cash equivalent assets, which may be bonds or even corporate debt or something sketchier, allegedly offshore in a bank, right? But then you also have like a very big category, which is important to talk about, which is over collateralized, right? And typically the over collateralized are over collateralized because they're collateralized with crypto, right? So this is the main thing we want to talk about here is DAI, which is basically like every DAI is backed by like ETH in like a maker vault, right? And there's way more ETH than the value of the DAI, right? It's over collateralized. And then
it's like a 2 to 1, kind of like right? 1.5 ETH for every DAI dollar.
Yeah, I mean it fluctuates depending on how aggressive people are being with their vaults, but that's probably about right in aggregate, right? And then you can kind of go down the risk curve, right? Like we have MIM, Magic Internet Money, which is sort of like, it's basically like MakerDAO, but with riskier collateral. And I use it a lot because it's very degen friendly. Like instead of using ETH as collateral, you can actually use the Y-Curve ST-ETH pool as collateral, which I forgot to mention in my strategies. But that's like a fun degen strategy, right? Because you take your Lido ETH, you put it in a convex pool, you earn like 8% in the pool, and then you can borrow Magic Internet Money against it at only 0.5% interest, right? Which gives you all of these stables to then go do other degen stuff with, right? So that's kind of like a fun out the risk curve thing. We can talk about that more in the Discord. We don't have to go into it too much.
No, that's a good point. That's a very good point, because like each one of these things is going to be backed by something different, collateralized by something different, and that will bring out its own inherent risks within each stablecoin itself. And then when you go on to the protocols to like yield off them, you'll notice typically that like the yields are different based on the risks of each stablecoin itself, right? So like within Stargate Finance, for instance, this is one that we talked about in our Discord. You'll see that I can even pull it up now, but like you'll see that USDC will probably give you a lower return than you'd get on USDT, because USDT is a little riskier inherently.
So when we look at risks, the base risk, the primary risk is what is the stable coin that you're in? Yeah, what is the coin? Okay.
Right. So I think maybe we all agree on this, but maybe we don't. Like I think DAI and DAI based stablecoins are probably the safest of all,
because they exclude regulation risk, where USDC could fall in the regulation territory. Is that right? Why?
They're not using fiat currency as the collateral, and the fiat could be.
I want to see Steven's take on this risk specifically.
But they kind of are, and this is where like there's a lot of this gray area, right? Like one of the problems with over collateralized stablecoins is they can't really scale to meet demand, because you can only generate as much of them as you have collateral, right? Now, this has caused Maker to start using other things as collateral. But one of the things they're using as collateral is USDC, right? And now we can talk that like maybe this will get phased out in the future. But you have this weird in-between thing now where like a portion of the collateral is actually this kind of like semi-regulated fiat-based thing, right? So it might not be as pristine as we want it to be. But I think that what you're saying, Eric, in like a vacuum or in like my ideal world, or how it used to be, because it didn't used to be like that. Like I would kind of agree with you. Like DAI would be my kind of go-to, like go into a coma and like nothing in the world can touch my stable coins thing. But I'm actually not sure of that anymore, and I've been diversifying myself.
That's a fair point. I like where your head's at. I think I'll just take the opposite side of it, and I just think like when I first heard Justin Drake talking about the need that you're describing, which is like we need more collateral for DAI to make DeFi more sustainable, it made me uber bullish on Ethereum, like maybe uber bullish on Ether token price, where it's like, oh my God, these guys are gonna fucking pump ETH to make DeFi make sense. Like, because the price of ETH is inherently connected to your stable coins. So like,
We didn't even talk about Frax too, which is kind of like its own like in between category, right? Because Frax
Describe the
is
basics
like,
for us. Yeah.
yeah, Frax like a 10,000 foot view, right? It's a hybrid between a collateralized and an algorithmic stablecoin, right? It basically has the ability to dynamically float between anything from 0% to 100% collateralized, right? And the aha moment with Frax was that like the market itself is going to decide what the collateralization ratio should be, right? It's capital inefficient to like have a coin 150% collateralized if the market would be fine with it being 70% collateralized, right? And there's been like a big revolution in the last like week, right? There's been a lot of stuff stirred up with the advent of this thing in Curve called the 4 pool, right? For a while we've had the 3 pool, which was USDC, DAI, and
UST.
Tether,
Sorry,
right?
Tether, probably.
Yeah,
USDT.
and that was like that was like the T-bills of DeFi, right? But now like we've got this thing where Terra with their UST coin and Frax have sort of come together, and they made the 4 pool, which is this pool that is causing a lot of controversy because a lot of people are like, whoa, we're gonna make this like baseline pool of like DeFi stable liquidity based on like completely algorithmic or partially algorithmic coins. Like, what are the risk effects of this? But the upside of this is that users who are willing to like hold these coins and use this pool can get like insane yields on their cash right now. So this is another thing that I'm working through at the moment.
So you guys know this, but it's important to point out that like when you provide liquidity using 3 or 4 different stablecoins, and one goes to shit, like you're not like 75% okay, 24% gone. Like you end up getting 100% of the shitty one. That's how liquidity providing works. So like if one breaks and you're providing liquidity to all 4 of them, like you end up with 100% of the one that broke. And I don't think that like that's not inherent to like traditional finance. People don't understand that. They think, oh, diversification. We're going to be safer this way. It's actually the opposite.
Right.
That's such a good point, because I think some people who might not know what they're doing, they might see a pool with like 4 coins in it, and USDC is one of the coins, right? And they're like, oh, I'll put my USDC in this pool and I'll make 14%. And oh God, well, maybe one of the coins dies and the pool loses 20% of its coins and I'm down 20%, but that's okay because I've been earning 25% interest and I'll live with that. And that's not how pools work, as Eric said. Like if one asset goes to 0, the whole pool goes to 0. So that's if you're gonna do the LP thing, that might be a thing you want to educate yourself on if you're a listener who's interested in that.
So let me ask you guys, like, what's your hierarchy of stablecoin safety?
USDC, DAI. After that, it gets a little dicey because then we're talking about Tether or UST. Tether's backed by some shitty commercial debt, company
that we don't even we have no clarity on.
Zero transparency.
We have no transparency.
Backed by like another token, Luna, and we've talked about it last episode. You can check it out, which and also will be partially backed by Bitcoin, and we get into murky territory.
I'm so bummed I missed that fucking conversation on
we needed you on it, to be honest. It really let us down. But I would say USDC and DAI, and like if any listener wants to go deeper into the USDC, you should understand Circle. There's a company that manages USDC, and if you want to understand it more, you have to look into the company Circle and what they do, and they have other services and ways they make money. But the CEO of Circle has to go up in front of Congress and testify, and so understanding that dynamic is important.
I think what might be good is to just like quickly bullet point the risks of the different categories of coins. It's super quick. Like USDC, It's not going to go to 0, but like Circle actually has the ability to like freeze wallets, and you're basically taking on US regulatory risk by holding that coin. Like the government could basically decide that you can't move your cash anymore, which is unacceptable for some people in DeFi. But if you're like a casual TradFi guy who's just trying to earn yield in the DeFi world, that might be totally fine for you. You're more concerned with your coin going to zero, right? Tether risk there is pretty like obvious, right? There's the risk that there's just some shenanigans going on in the Bahamas and there's no money there, and one day you wake up and there's like a run on the bank.
Tether's backed by like 70 cents for every dollar, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, right. Something like that.
Yeah.